Welcome back, lore hunters. Tonight, we step inside the world of one of gaming's greatest universes. Find a comfortable position, let the story unfold, and drift into another world. Close your eyes or soften your gaze, allowing the day's lingering tensions to gently dissipate, like mist receding before the dawn. Feel the subtle support beneath you, the quiet rhythm of your breath settling into a slow, comforting pulse as a deep sense of stillness fully embraces you. Imagine a tranquil twilight descending upon a vast, ancient land. Picture rolling hills and shadowed valleys, all hinting at a past far grander and more complex than what meets the eye. This is Tamriel, a name resonant with countless epic sagas and heroic deeds. But tonight, we journey beyond the familiar tales of dragons, Daedric princes, or mortal empires locked in their eternal dance of power. We delve deeper, further back than even the most weathered histories written by the diligent scribes of Cyrodiil, or the meticulous chroniclers of High Rock. Our destination is an epoch so ancient, so profoundly shrouded in the mists of time, that its colossal civilizations rose, battled, and ultimately fell, their grand conflicts echoing silently across millennia, their very existence nearly scrubbed from the annals of remembrance. Our quest this evening is to unearth the forgotten whispers of a truly great war, a conflict so immense, so devastating in its scope and power, that its very memory was largely erased from the collective consciousness of the world, leaving only its spectral imprint on the very stones, the deep earth, and the subtly altered magical currents of Tamriel. This is a story etched not in scrolls, but in the silent testament of ruins. Picture these ruins not as mere rubble, but as colossal storybooks, their weathered pages etched in stone, shadow, and the persistent green of ancient moss. Each crumbling archway, every fractured column, every collapsed ceiling, and every forgotten subterranean crypt holds a fragment of a narrative long lost to common knowledge, waiting patiently for a curious mind to observe. The very air within these silent catacombs and exposed foundations seems to hum with ancient energies, a faint, almost imperceptible thrum that speaks of immense power once wielded, now slowly fading. What cataclysms could possibly possess the power to erase such a monumental conflict from the collective memory of an entire world? What esoteric powers were truly wielded? What impossible alliances were forged? And what mighty civilizations were shattered to leave behind only these silent, stoic guardians of a forgotten age? We are not seeking grand battles replayed in vivid detail, but rather the subtle ghosts of their aftermath, the lingering arcane energies that cling to obsidian shards, the strategic placement of fortresses now crumbling into indistinct hills, the unique, and often strange materials used in desperate times of war, and the profound, world-shaping consequences that resonate in unseen ways, even into the present day. Allow your mind to gently wander through these imagined, hallowed landscapes, feeling the cool, aged stone beneath your fingertips, sensing the immense scale of what once was, and recognizing the quiet resilience of nature slowly reclaiming its own. As we delve deeper into this quiet contemplation, the very ground beneath our imaginary feet seems to remember. The subtle lay of the land, the meandering flow of rivers, the inexplicable formation of certain mountains, or the deep, inaccessible chasms, all might bear the subtle, geological scars of ancient, truly earth-shaking confrontations. Think of the inexplicable, deep-rooted magical corruption found in certain forgotten crypts, or the unexplained, powerful energy sources still humming faintly within sealed-off subterranean cities, their purpose long obscured by time. These are not random occurrences or natural phenomena. They are the distinct, persistent fingerprints left by a truly forgotten cataclysm. This great war was not just a series of isolated skirmishes or local conflicts, but a continent-spanning, world-altering event that redefined the very fabric of Tamriel, fundamentally altering its geography, its deep magical currents, and perhaps even the hidden destiny of its nascent races. Our journey into these forgotten echoes is a meditative exploration of these silent witnesses, patiently piecing together a grand narrative from dust and echoes, from the faint, ethereal glimmers of light cast by long-extinguished flames. Let the quiet contemplation of these profound mysteries guide you deeper into a tranquil state. As the true scale of Tamriel's forgotten past begins to gently, reverently unfold before your mind's eye, our journey begins at the edge of a forgotten landscape, where the air itself feels ancient, heavy with the quietude of ages. Ahead, a sprawling complex of ruins emerges from the twilight mist, its colossal forms silhouetted against a bruised sky. These aren't merely crumbling stones. They are the petrified memories of a cataclysm, a silent testament to a war so profound it reshaped the very fabric of Tamriel, then receded into the deep currents of forgotten history. The soft, damp earth beneath our feet whispers of battles long over, its surface slowly yielding to the persistent tendrils of moss and ivy, reclaiming what was once violently disturbed. A deep, almost imperceptible hum resonates from the largest structures, a faint echo of energies once unleashed with world-shattering intent, now barely a ghost of their former power. The initial chill of the evening gives way to a peculiar warmth emanating from the stone, a warmth that feels less like residual sunlight and more like trapped energy, slowly diffusing after millennia. As we draw nearer, individual features of the monumental architecture become clearer through the swirling fog. What first appeared as shapeless bulk resolves into fractured columns, immense, yet gracefully carved archways, and the skeletal remains of towering walls that once defined grand courtyards. Each stone, rough and tactile beneath an imagined touch, tells a story of wear and resilience. Patches of luminous moss cling to weathered carvings, casting a soft, phosphorescent glow that hints at lingering magic within the very bedrock. This isn't just decay, it's a slow, deliberate erosion, revealing layers of time and purpose. The air here holds a faint, metallic tang, like distant thunder, a scent not of recent rain, but of ancient, potent energies that once ripped through the very earth, leaving an indelible imprint. We sense the immense scale of what once was, the deliberate, strategic placement of these colossal structures, now merely sentinels of silence. Moving deeper into the embrace of these silent guardians, the ambient temperature dips slightly, but it's a calm, even chill, not a sudden bite. We find ourselves within what might have been a fortified gateway, now merely a gaping maw in the colossal stone. Here, the subtle hum we noticed earlier intensifies, transforming into a low, resonant thrum that vibrates through the ground and into the soles of our feet. It's not a sound heard with the ears, but felt throughout the entire body, a primal vibration of power embedded within the ancient, obsidian-like stones of the archway, barely visible under centuries of grime and moss, are faint, geometric patterns, not common masonry, but subtle, arcane symbols that seem to absorb, and then faintly re-emit the scant light. This is where the world began to bleed during that great war, not with crimson, but with unraveling magic. And the very air here still feels subtly altered, heavier, pregnant with the echoes of incredible, esoteric forces unleashed. Our path leads us closer to one of these titanic fragments, a section of wall leaning precariously, yet held together by ancient mortar and the stubborn grip of time. Here, the soft glow of the luminous moss illuminates a vast expanse of intricate carvings. These aren't the familiar symbols of Nordic heroes or Aeolid geometries. They are complex, almost alien glyphs, depicting armies clashing with forces that seem to defy common understanding. Lines of warriors, not just human or mer, but diverse species, many now only myth, march in synchronized terror or resolute courage against swirling, formless adversaries that hint at a profound, cosmic struggle. Each etched figure, though worn by countless seasons, retains a powerful, silent narrative. They speak of a unity forged in dire need, a coalition against a threat so monumental it required the combined might of forgotten empires. The weight of this silent history presses gently, a solemn revelation unfolding under the watchful, misty sky, passing beneath a fractured archway, its keystone now a precarious perch for a single gnarled tree root. We enter what must have been an immense hall. The air here is stiller, colder, yet imbued with an almost palpable quietude, a hush that suggests centuries of unbroken silence. Dust motes dance in the faint shafts of moonlight that pierce through gaping holes in the collapsed roof, forming ephemeral columns of light. Along the walls, the stone reveals faint scorch marks, not from conventional fire, but from something far more intense, something that fused and vitrified the rock in places. This is the unmistakable signature of ancient magic, unleashed with incredible force, a memory seared into the very fabric of the building. It hints at spells of a caliber rarely seen even in the grand tales of today, a power wielded in desperate defense or devastating offense during the forgotten Great War. Deeper within this quiet sanctuary of time, we find a curious arrangement of collapsed stone blocks, clearly not natural debris. Upon closer inspection, these form a barricade skillfully constructed from fallen architectural elements, now itself partly decayed. Behind it, in a small, sheltered alcove, lie what appear to be the rusted remnants of ancient weaponry, not swords or conventional shields, but heavier, more esoteric implements, possibly siege tools or arcane foci, their forms obscured by layers of rust and soil. One piece, a shard of what might have been a ceremonial blade, still holds a faint, internal shimmer, a hint of residual enchantment refusing to fully dissipate. These are not merely relics, they are fragments of desperate last stands, silent witnesses to warriors who defended this place, armed with forgotten arts, against a force that ultimately overwhelmed them. Their vigil, though millennia past, still resonates in the heavy air. The scorch marks etched into the aelid stone aren't uniform. Some areas still glow faintly with a residual energy, a soft, ethereal luminescence that pulses with a forgotten rhythm. They trace intricate patterns across the walls and even the collapsed sections of the roof, resembling complex, unknown sigils that refuse to fade completely. These weren't merely destructive blasts of fire or force, but rather the chaotic, powerful unraveling of immense protective or offensive spells, leaving indelible magical ghosts on the very fabric of the building. The cold air here, though still, carries not just the scent of dust and damp stone, but perhaps a faint, metallic tang, like ozone after a violent lightning strike, a ghostly whisper of the raw, untamed power that once tore through this space with such devastating intent. The silence itself feels heavy, pregnant with untold narratives, not just of the mages who cast those earth-shattering spells, but of the countless warriors who stood against such incomprehensible forces. The vitrified rock isn't simply melted, it's transformed, a crystalline sheen covering vast sections of the walls, reflecting the faint shafts of moonlight in fractured, melancholic gleams. Moving deeper into the hall, the immense space gradually widens into a vast central chamber, its ceiling a cavernous expanse where starlight now freely cascades through the largest breach in the collapsed roof. In the very center of this grand area, a colossal pedestal remains, though whatever grand artifact or sacred idol it once bore is long gone, vanished into the annals of time, or perhaps claimed in the heat of battle. Around this central pedestal, the floor is intricately cracked in radial patterns, like a ripple frozen in stone, emanating outwards from a point of immense impact or resonant magical power. Here, the air thrums with a subtle, low frequency, barely perceptible to the ear, yet a deep hum that seems to resonate gently in the bones, a ghost of powerful enchantments that once pulsed through this very heart of the chamber. Faint, almost indiscernible outlines on the high walls suggest where intricate tapestries or murals once adorned the space, depicting the history or perhaps the strategic purpose of this chamber. They have long since crumbled to dust, leaving only these ghostly imprints on the aged stone. Perhaps this grand space was a strategic command center, a gathering place for allied forces from diverse realms, or a vital nexus for channeling the vast, destructive magic that scarred these walls. Along the periphery of this central chamber, partially buried under centuries of accumulated debris and fallen masonry, lie the shattered remnants of what might have been ornate pews, grand ceremonial seating, or perhaps even arcane conduits for channeling magic. These are now mere husks of their former glory, their delicate carvings eroded, their purpose long forgotten. One particular section reveals a series of smaller, recessed alcoves set into the thick stone walls, each containing the faint spectral glow of a long-extinguished runic circle. These aren't destructive scorch marks, but rather the remnants of activation, as if these alcoves once served as charging stations, amplification points, or focal nodes for individual mages, allowing them to pool their powers and amplify their abilities in profound unison. The air in these alcoves grows marginally warmer than the rest of the chamber, a testament to the lingering thermal imprint of immense magical exertion from a bygone age. Nearby, a fallen, broken statue, half submerged in the rubble, depicts a figure of indeterminate race, its features eroded beyond clear recognition, yet possessing the regal, resolute posture of a leader or a powerful guardian. The radial patterns in the floor, initially appearing as mere damage, begin to reveal a deeper purpose under closer inspection. Along their intricate lines, a faint, ethereal glow occasionally pulses, almost imperceptibly, mirroring the low-frequency hum that still vibrates gently through the stone, its luminescence born not of active magic, but of memory, a spectral afterimage of the raw power that once flowed here, a silent testament to the colossal energies once unleashed from this very spot. These aren't just cracks, they are channels, conduits for a force so immense it permanently altered the very fabric of the chamber's foundation, leaving behind this ghostly, rhythmic heartbeat. The light seems to trace paths that converge and diverge, suggesting a complex magical circuit board etched into the stone, guiding or amplifying immense spells, shifting one's gaze upwards. The faint, almost indiscernible outlines on the high walls gain a spectral clarity in the soft, intermittent glow from the floor. These aren't just faded decorations. Closer examination reveals the shadowy suggestions of vast, stylized maps, perhaps depicting battlefronts or strategic ley lines, stretching across unknown territories. Other sections imply towering figures clad in ancient, forgotten armor, their forms faded to mere suggestions, yet hinting at the might of the legions that once converged here. The murals, now but whispers, tell of alliances forged in the face of cataclysm, of diverse peoples, Aeolid mages, Nordic warriors, perhaps even early Dwemer engineers, uniting against a common, overwhelming foe. The sheer scale implied by these faint images suggests a conflict that transcended regional skirmishes, impacting Tamriel as a whole, a war of such magnitude that its echoes still ripple through the very stones. Near the very edge of this immense central chamber, nestled amongst fallen debris and centuries of dust, a peculiar structure comes into view. It is a partially overturned altar, clearly designed for complex magical workings, its surface still bearing faint scorch marks and intricate, broken runic carvings. One particular rune, though fractured, still emits a feeble amber flicker, distinct from the blue-green of the floor. This ancient symbol, recognizable to only the most devoted scholars of arcane history, once signified a connection to a specific school of defensive magic, or perhaps a powerful warding spell, now long inert. Its presence here, amidst the overwhelming evidence of destructive power, hints at a desperate struggle, a final attempt to protect this crucial nexus from utter annihilation, a last stand against forces that ultimately proved too great. As the spectral maps faded back into the ancient stone, their faint, ephemeral glows receding into the rough-hewn surface, the low, resonant hum that had vibrated through the chamber seemed to grow subtly, leading the eye not to further painted images, but to the very construction of the edifice itself. Here, the subtle interplay of various cultures began to manifest, not just in abstract murals, but in the layered engineering of the ruin. Patches of polished, unfamiliar metal, seemingly fused directly into the older, rough-hewn stone, spoke of an advanced, almost alien craftsmanship. These were not mere repairs, but foundational insertions, reinforcing what must have been critical junctures. Their surfaces cool to the touch, betraying an enduring resilience. Intricate gears, long since seized by millennia of disuse, yet still perfectly aligned within their recessed housings, hinted at complex mechanisms designed for an unimaginable purpose. Perhaps a grand power generator, a temporal distortion field, or some form of arcane weapon. Small vents, too, now barely more than narrow slits in the metal, occasionally expelled faint, warm wisps of air, carrying the merest whisper of ancient steam, a ghost of the colossal thermal power that once surged through these very walls. Moving deeper into the vast complex, the Dwemer influence became more pronounced, intertwining seamlessly with the earlier, more primal stonework of the original structure. Colossal, reinforced doorways, crafted from a gleaming, bronze-like alloy, stood partially ajar, their immense weight testament to the sheer physical and magical forces they were designed to repel. Along their massive frames, delicate yet formidable engravings snaked, less ornamental and more instructional warnings, perhaps, or diagrams of ancient traps long since dormant. Their meanings lost to time, but their intent still clear on some sections of the metallic surfaces, particularly around the locking mechanisms and pivot points. Deep gouges and melted scars marred the otherwise pristine engineering, not from natural decay or the gentle erosion of ages, but from blunt, concussive force and searing magical energy. These were unmistakable marks of a titanic, prolonged struggle, impacts that had bent and fused metal designed to be impervious. The scars were not random. They were systematic breaches, focused on critical weak points, indicating an enemy of considerable tactical intelligence and overwhelming destructive power, an enemy that understood the nuances of Dwemer construction. Beyond these formidable, yet ultimately breached, defensive perimeters, the sense of ancient defeat became almost palpable, weaving itself into the very fabric of the air. Here, the architectural styles seemed to converge and clash in a desperate, unintentional, tragic tapestry, woven from the remnants of different peoples, what might have been Dwemer watchtowers, engineered with breathtaking precision, now stood half-collapsed, their gleaming metal skeletons held precariously aloft by crudely reinforced buttresses of unworked stone, a desperate, final attempt by other, less advanced hands to hold a crumbling line. The sophisticated Dwemer design, once so dominant, was now patched and jury-rigged with materials and techniques alien to their own, indicating an alliance fighting tooth and nail against overwhelming odds, sharing resources and methodologies in extremis, scattered among the fallen mechanisms and dislodged plating were faint impressions in the dust and grime, not of Dwemer automatons, but of varied footfalls, the heavier tread of Nordic warriors, the lighter prints of elven mages, perhaps even the splayed marks of beast folk, all converging in a final stand. Discarded, brittle fragments of unfamiliar alloys lay scattered, perhaps remnants of weapons or shields belonging to the diverse allies mentioned in the murals, each piece a silent sentinel to a vanished warrior, passing through the mangled remnants of those formidable Dwemer doors. The sheer scale of the internal devastation became starkly apparent. The chamber beyond, vast and cavernous, was a silent testament to unimaginable forces. The very floor, once a meticulously patterned mosaic of interlocking metal plates, was now a fractured landscape of upended sections, scorched fissures, and deep gouges that plunged into the dark earth below, strange, vitrified patches, glistening with an unnatural, almost obsidian sheen, spread across areas where the concussive force had been most intense, fusing stone and metal into an unyielding, glassy substance. Along the periphery, fallen segments of colossal Dwemer piping lay scattered like discarded toys, their bronze-like casings warped and twisted into impossible shapes, their internal mechanisms splayed open to reveal crystalline conduits shattered into glimmering dust. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated through the air, a deep, persistent vibration that seemed to emanate from the very bedrock, a ghost of the colossal machinery that once powered this place, now singing a melancholic requiem of its demise. Further into the cavern, the air grew noticeably heavier, almost charged with a residual energy that prickled the skin, yet brought no discomfort, only a profound sense of antiquity. Here, the very stone walls of the chamber bore the most direct and unnerving evidence of the arcane warfare. Veins of solidified, glowing energy, ranging in color from deep sapphire to angry crimson, snaked through the bedrock, appearing as if the magical energies of battle had been instantly frozen, calcified into immutable scars. These weren't mere superficial scorches. They were deep inclusions, sometimes forming intricate, almost organic patterns that defied simple explanation. One particularly large section of wall, spanning dozens of feet, had been transformed into a shimmering mural of fused ethereal material, depicting what appeared to be swirling vortexes of power and the faint, ephemeral outlines of struggling forms caught in their grasp, forever etched into the rock by an unknown cataclysm. It suggested not just weapon impacts, but an elemental clash that fundamentally altered the material world. Beyond this chamber, the path opened into a winding, natural cavern, though even here, the signs of conflict were imprinted onto the ancient landscape. It was as if the battle had not been confined to the Dwemer structures, but had spilled out, or perhaps originated, within the very earth. Massive stalagmites and stalactites, centuries in the making, now lay shattered on the floor, some snapped cleanly, others reduced to glistening piles of crystalline shards. The air here was cooler, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp stone and a metallic tang that lingered faintly. Ponderous, ancient stone bridges, spanning unseen abysses, were not merely broken, but seemed to have been violently wrenched from their moorings. Their colossal supports buckled and twisted as if by a giant's hand. This sprawling destruction, reaching far beyond the confines of the engineered corridors, painted a picture of a conflict so vast and so cataclysmic that it had fundamentally reshaped not just civilization, but the very geological features of the land itself. The whispers of the Great War felt less like a distant memory and more like an ongoing, silent tremor beneath the world. As the eye adjusted to the interplay of petrified magic and ancient stone, a subtle shift in the wall's texture became apparent. What first appeared as random eddies of solidified arcane energy began to resolve into deliberate, intricate patterns. Here and there, where the fiery crimson and deep sapphire veins intersected, faint, almost ephemeral etchings emerged from beneath the surface, as if the magic itself had been a sculptor, carving language into the very bedrock. These weren't the stark, chiseled characters of Nordic or Aelid script, but something far older, less defined, their forms reminiscent of swirling nebulae or microscopic filaments, imbued with an inner luminescence that pulsed softly, almost imperceptibly, mirroring the persistent hum in the cavern air. Tracing a finger along one such formation, the stone felt cool and unnervingly smooth, a stark contrast to the rough, eroded surfaces elsewhere in the ruin. It was as if this particular section of the wall had been subjected to an intense, transformative process, leaving behind not just scars, but a cryptic testament to the forces unleashed. Moving deeper into the chamber, Similar ethereal inscriptions became more concentrated, almost forming contiguous passages across broader swathes of the magically altered rock. They seemed to follow the flow of the calcified magical currents, weaving in and out of the sapphire and crimson streaks, suggesting a deliberate symbiotic relationship between the chaotic energy and the inscribed messages. Some sections of these glowing glyphs appeared to shimmer with a faint internal movement, like heat haze above a distant desert, or the subtle dance of a deep-sea creature. It was an optical illusion, perhaps, born of weary eyes and the cavern's low, consistent hum, yet it lent an unsettling sentience to the archaic script. Close observation revealed slight variations in their luminosity, a sort of breathing rhythm that was entirely natural to their magical composition, not a trick of the light. Each symbol, though alien, seemed to carry a weight of forgotten meaning, a silent chronicle embedded by forces long since departed. At the very heart of this runic tapestry, where the chamber widened slightly, stood a monolith of obsidian-like material, perfectly smooth and reflecting the ethereal glow of the walls like a dark mirror. Unlike the surrounding bedrock, this monolith bore no natural or battle-scarred textures. It was a pure, unblemished surface, save for a single, centrally located symbol that shone with a steady, intense light, a deep, almost indigo hue, distinct from the sapphire and crimson on the walls. This symbol was starkly geometric, an interlocking design that felt both alien and strangely familiar, somehow resonating with the ancient hum of the cavern. It didn't pulse or shimmer, it simply was, a beacon of immutable information. The air around the monolith felt stiller, almost expectant, as if it held its breath, guarding the profound secret encoded within that single, unwavering glyph. It felt like a key, or perhaps a singular declaration, standing as a silent, unyielding witness to the cataclysm that had fused magic and matter in this forgotten place. The ethereal script wasn't confined to a single wall, but began to reveal itself as a vast, interconnected tapestry of glowing energy, weaving across the very fabric of the chamber. Moving beyond the immediate discovery, the passage opened into a grander hall, its colossal, rough-hewn pillars now visibly scarred, as if they had weathered not just the millennia, but some cataclysmic event. The ancient, calcified magical currents that formed the glowing script now snaked along these massive supports, some glyphs appearing to mend fractured stone, others merely highlighting the deep, jagged fissures that marred the otherwise imposing architecture. It was here that the persistent hum of the cavern deepened, becoming a resonant thrum that vibrated gently through the soles of one's feet. suggesting the entire structure was not merely a ruin, but a dormant, colossal mechanism, intricately tied to the very energy it contained. The luminescent script pulsed in response to this deepening vibration, a silent, ancient language speaking of forces that once shaped and then reshaped the world. The scale of the damage became clearer as one moved through the resonant hall. Some sections of the floor were buckled and warped, as if an immense, unseen pressure had sought to rend the very foundations apart. Here, amidst the chaos of broken flagstones and displaced masonry, the glowing script intensified, forming dense constellations of symbols, not just on the walls, but across the floor and ceiling, delineating patterns that seemed defensive in nature. These weren't just records. They were a complex web of wards and safeguards, shattered and reformed over untold ages. Patches of the stone glowed with a faint, internal heat, betraying residual magical energies, cold to the touch in some places, subtly warm in others, like the dying embers of a forgotten magical forge. The air itself, though still, carried a faint, metallic tang, a subtle scent of ozone and ancient conflict, lingering in the deep shadows where the glowing glyphs dared not reach. Further within, past collapsed archways and debris-strewn passages, a vast circular chamber came into view, truly massive, as if designed to house an entire legion. The ceiling here was absent, having long since collapsed, revealing a distant, stardusted sky, framed by the jagged remains of a colossal dome. Yet, even under the open sky, the air remained remarkably still, imbued with the persistent thrum. The glowing script here was no longer confined to walls or floors, but pulsed across the exposed, fragmented bedrock that formed the chamber's perimeter. A final, monumental testament. It spoke of immense power unleashed, a cataclysm that tore through the very foundations of this fortress city. Not just a structure, but a stronghold of an empire brought to its knees. The sheer scale implied a war not just of armies, but of world-shaking magical forces, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like the very land remembered the screams. Long after the echoes faded, the persistent thrum, a low, resonant heartbeat of the colossal ruin, began to subtly shift as one ventured beyond the main hall. The glowing script, which had pulsed with such ancient vitality, now seemed to draw inward, its luminescence fading to a softer, more introspective glow. It no longer danced across every surface, but collected in deeper recesses, tracing lines along the seams of great stone panels that slid almost imperceptibly into place. As if sealing off deeper secrets, the metallic tang in the air softened, replaced by a faint, earthy scent, like damp soil over long-forgotten roots. Here, the very stone seemed to absorb sound, the vibrant hum of the mechanism fading into a gentle whisper, leaving only the soft brush of one's own movement against the dust-laden floor. It was a passage designed not just to lead, but to quiet, to prepare the mind for an even more profound silence, a deeper layer of the ruin that actively sought to suppress the clamor of the past. One could almost feel the weight of untold ages pressing down, not just on the architecture, but on the very air, stilling any lingering echoes before they could truly resonate. The passage opened into a chamber, unlike the chaotic, battle-scarred halls before it. This space was circular, its walls lined with niches that once held scrolls or crystalline memory devices, now empty save for fine gray dust. Yet faint indentations remained, spectral imprints on the stone, suggesting the shapes of what was lost. In the center, a colossal, fragmented crystal structure rose from the floor, like a shattered geode. Its facets, once surely polished to reflect and amplify knowledge, were now dull and opaque, crisscrossed with hairline fractures. Some sections of the floor around it were intricately carved with what appeared to be constellations of data. But these glyphs, unlike the vibrant ones in the main hall, lay dormant, infused with an unnerving inertia. Moving through this hushed archive, one's gaze might fall upon the remnants of murals. These weren't the triumphant war banners of later ages, but intricate, almost ephemeral depictions of what could only be colossal, world-shaking events. Yet each image bore marks of deliberate, methodical defacement. Not violent destruction, but a systematic blurring, a magical erosion of detail that left only spectral outlines and faint, ghost-like colors. Faces were smudged beyond recognition, grand battles reduced to indistinct swirling forms, and powerful magical artifacts rendered as mere blurs of light. It was a subtle, insidious form of erasure, as if the very concepts themselves had been gently, but firmly, coaxed from the collective memory. The inert glyphs, etched into the stone floor around the colossal crystal, seemed at first merely dormant, devoid of purpose. Yet, upon closer, lingering observation, a faint, iridescent sheen could be perceived within their grooves, a subtle, almost imperceptible discoloration that suggested not ancient age, but an unnatural strain. It was as if a slow-acting venom had seeped into their very essence, dulling their potential light, turning their once vibrant patterns into mere husks. A thin, crystalline dust, unlike the common gray motes of the ruin, settled unevenly in their depressions, glinting with a sickly, pale violet under what little ambient light diffused through the chamber. This wasn't merely dust from crumbling stone. It felt like the residue of something consumed, something that had pulsed with energy and was now hollowed out. The air itself, though still, carried a faint, metallic sweet tang, like iron left too long in damp earth, but with a sharp, almost painful undertone that made the breath catch. This unsettling hue, this subtle decay, seemed to emanate not just from the glyphs, but also from the larger, fragmented crystal in the chamber's heart. Its once clear facets, meant to gather and disseminate energy, now bore a network of darker, spiderweb cracks that weren't merely structural. Within these fissures, the same faint violet tinge could be seen, more concentrated, like veins of a slow-moving, petrified poison. The colossal structure, once a beacon of stored knowledge, now felt less like a broken artifact and more like a slowly dying organism, silently weeping its arcane essence into the stone. It suggested a catastrophic magical overload, a weapon whose destructive pulse had not only shattered the crystal, but had left a lingering spiritual and elemental scar, forever staining the very fabric of this ancient place. The silence here wasn't just an absence of sound. It was an active dampening, as if the chamber itself was trying to contain the dying echoes, preventing their malevolent resonance from spreading further. The creeping blight was not confined to the central chamber. Tracing the lines of the stone, one's gaze might be drawn to a subtle seam in the far wall, almost perfectly camouflaged by the prevailing decay. Here, a darker, more viscous residue had collected, pooling in a faint depression, hinting at an egress where the corrosive energy had flowed most heavily. The air, already heavy with that strange metallic sweetness, intensified subtly near this hidden fissure, carrying an almost imperceptible chill that didn't belong to the natural world. It was a passage, not merely leading deeper into the ruin, but into the very heart of the cursed earth, a path where the echoes of the ancient war had solidified into a tangible, lingering scar on the land itself. This was the silent testament to a weaponized magic that had not merely destroyed, but had poisoned the very essence of existence, leaving an eternal wound that continued to seep its bitter truth into the stone. The metallic sweet tang that clung to the air, the violet dust, and the unsettling silence within the chamber slowly begin to dissipate, not disappearing entirely, but softening, diffusing into the vastness of the world above. The localized wound of the crystal, though still etched deep, merges into a broader narrative, a scar across the very canvas of Tamriel itself. Imagine the countless similar wounds scattered across the continents, each whispering of a force so profound it altered the very essence of stone and sky. The Great War, not merely a conflict of armies and spells, but a cataclysm that resonated through the magical fabric of the land, leaving these subtle, pervasive stains. As the immediate, sharp edges of the chamber's decay recede from our focus, we begin to perceive the war's presence less as a direct threat and more as a profound, sorrowful memory held by the earth itself. It is a slow exhaling, an ancient sigh carried on unseen currents that washes over the deeper ruins, cloaked in mist and time. These are the forgotten echoes, not screaming in torment, but settling into a long, quiet slumber beneath layers of soil, root, and patient stone. The destructive pulse, once so potent it shattered crystal and warped essence, has itself begun to weather, its violent energy mellowing into a lingering hum, a barely perceptible tremor in the deep bedrock. The violet tinge, once a sign of petrified poison, becomes a faded blush on ancient moss, a testament to struggles long past and slowly absorbed by the world's enduring strength. The quiet deepens, no longer actively dampening, but simply observing, allowing the remnants of that grand, forgotten conflict to finally, truly rest. As the millennia unfolded, the remnants of that devastating conflict were embraced and slowly softened by the patient hand of nature. Great trees, their roots snaking through shattered foundations, absorbed the last vestiges of raw arcane energy, converting its potent remnants into their very lifeblood, twisting their branches in silent, gnarled commemoration. The wind, once a carrier of battle cries and desperate spells, now weaves through the skeletal arches of forgotten cities, a gentle, mournful breath carrying no malice, only the timeless scent of damp earth and ancient stone. Lichen, soft as velvet, traces the faint lines of once glowing glyphs, obscuring the precise contours of their power, transforming sharp intent into abstract art. Water, ceaseless and patient, carves new paths through the war-torn landscape, polishing fragments of enchanted armaments into smooth, unidentifiable pebbles, blurring the lines between weapon and natural rock. These echoes are no longer sharp reverberations, but soft whispers, carried on the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, or the gentle gurgle of a hidden spring. The colossal structures, once monuments to triumph or despair, are now merely features of the landscape, their stories woven seamlessly into the tapestry of Tamriel's wild, untamed beauty. The weight of the past does not vanish, but it lightens, becomes part of the breathable air, the fertile soil, the quiet cycle of growth and decay. The faintest luminescence of residual magic, perhaps once a terrifying beacon, now only subtly catches the eye in the deepest shadows, like distant stars on a moonless night. A quiet reminder of immense power, now rendered inert, absorbed, and peaceful. And so, the vast silence of ages descends, a profound stillness that cradles the forgotten echoes of the Great War. The The world of Tamriel, immense and ancient, continues its gentle, endless turning, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires, the clash of magic and steel, the lingering scars, once pulsating with pain, have settled into a deep, dreamless sleep, becoming one with the earth, part of the quiet, enduring spirit of the land. Above these slumbering ruins, the twin moons, Masser and Secunda, trace their celestial paths, their silver light washing over crumbling walls and overgrown monuments, bestowing a final, tranquil blessing upon the hidden histories beneath. The air itself feels soft, laden with the weight of immeasurable time, yet utterly peaceful, inviting rest. There is no urgency in these ancient places, no lingering fear, only the immense, comforting embrace of forgotten ages. The stories, once vibrant with conflict and sorrow, have melted into the very essence of the world, becoming quiet dreams within its heart. We are left not with the sting of battle, but with the profound sense of peace that follows a storm long past, a world healed, and returning to its natural, tranquil rhythm. The subtle hum of arcane energy, once so jarring, now drifts into a quiet, almost imperceptible lullaby, a soft resonance that comforts rather than alarms. Allow your own thoughts to drift, to follow the path of the starlight, falling softly upon these ancient, silent places, for in this deep, quiet understanding, even the most profound conflicts of history can find their gentle, enduring rest, becoming merely a faint, beautiful sigh on the breath of time. The deep earth itself, a silent witness to millennia, has absorbed the profound tremors of that long-forgotten war. Far beneath the weathered stones and the patient soil, where roots of ancient trees seek their deepest sustenance, a faint, rhythmic pulse can sometimes be perceived. It is not a sound, nor a vibration that jars the senses, but rather a slow, almost imperceptible thrum, like the distant, vast heartbeat of Tamriel itself. This subtle resonance is a testament to the colossal energies once unleashed, now diffused into the very bedrock. Miners, delving into the deepest veins of the earth, occasionally report encountering pockets of unusually warm ore, or finding veins of crystal that softly shimmer with an inner light, distinct from any common geode. These occurrences are often dismissed as natural oddities, yet they are, in truth, the Earth's slow exhalation of absorbed arcane power, a gentle echo of spells that once tore mountains asunder or forged new pathways with raw elemental force. The very ground remembers, not with anger or pain, but with a quiet, enduring memory, slowly transforming the lingering chaos into a deep, foundational stillness. On the surface, above these deep-seated memories, the skeletal remains of ancient fortifications stand as quiet sentinels. Once formidable bastions, designed to withstand onslaughts of unimaginable power, they now merely accentuate the contours of the landscape, softened by the patient caress of time. Consider the remnants of what might have been an aelid watchtower, its gleaming white stones long since dulled to a soft, mottled gray-green by layers of moss and lichen, where once an archer might have stood, scanning the horizons for approaching legions. Now only the tireless wind sighs through empty embrasures. Robust vines, as thick as a man's arm, have coiled themselves around crumbling pillars, their strong tendrils slowly, but surely drawing the massive blocks even closer into the earth's embrace. Wildflowers, resilient and vibrant, push through cracks in the flagstones of former courtyards, their delicate petals blooming where blood once stained the ground, their beauty a silent, unassuming reclamation. The purpose of these structures, once so clear and defined by conflict, has been gently blurred, their imposing presence transformed into picturesque ruins that blend seamlessly with the surrounding wilderness, inviting contemplation rather than fear. Even the very air in these ancient places carries a peculiar quality, a faint, almost imperceptible difference in its weight and scent. During the quiet hours of twilight or the hushed stillness before dawn, a fine, ethereal mist often gathers around these forgotten battlegrounds, not merely from the condensation of the day, but perhaps imbued with the faintest traces of residual magic. Within this silver-spun veil, if one watches closely, one might occasionally observe tiny motes of light, drifting like microscopic fireflies, winking in and out of existence without sound or reason. These are not insects, nor common dust particles caught in a sunbeam, but rather the last, fleeting breaths of arcane energy, shimmering into visibility for a transient moment before dissolving back into the vast, unseen currents of Tamriel's magic. The flora unique to these zones, too, seems subtly influenced. Certain luminescent fungi thrive in the shadowed crevices of battle-scarred boulders, their soft glow a testament to the strange, slow transmutation of raw magical power into vibrant, if unusual, forms of life. These subtle, atmospheric shifts serve as gentle reminders that while the war itself has faded into legend, its immense energy has not vanished, but merely transformed, becoming an integral, peaceful part of the living world. The gentle blurring of purpose extends to the very texture of the stones themselves. Run your hand across a cyclopean block, long since tumbled from its perch, and you might feel not just the rough grain of granite or marble, but an almost imperceptible smoothness in certain depressions, as if immense pressure or heat once polished it. These are not the marks of erosion, nor the patient wear of wind and rain. They are the subtle, enduring signatures of forces beyond mortal comprehension, echoes of elemental magics that reshaped stone as easily as clay. The ground beneath, too, carries these memories. A slight, inexplicable warmth radiating from patches of earth, or the unusual mineral composition of a tiny, forgotten stream bed winding through a former barracks, hinting at dissolved metals and alchemical spills from a time when the very landscape groaned under the weight of conflict. Deeper within these forgotten spaces, where overgrown paths weave through what were once grand avenues, stand the remnants of more imposing structures. Imagine a watchtower, not merely a single column, but a complex of interconnected platforms and fallen bridges that once spanned a canyon. Here, the subtle hints become clearer declarations. A colossal arch, now cracked down its center, still displays faint carvings of stylized warriors clashing, their forms worn smooth by millennia, but their grim resolve still palpable. The stones are denser here, a deeper, almost obsidian-like hue in places, suggesting an unnatural tempering. This was a place of strategic importance, a choke point, a fortress where the forgotten Great War was not just fought, but endured with architectural fortitude, its designers pouring immense will and perhaps protective enchantments into every foundation stone. The subtle density of the stone, that faint, unnatural tempering, began to whisper of specific architects, of a design philosophy far grander and more intricate than the rudimentary fortresses of later ages. Moving beyond the exposed watchtower complex, the path dipped into a hollow, leading towards a vast, almost impossible cliff face. It was here that the true nature of the ruin began to reveal itself, not merely as a consequence of the war, but as a participant, a sentient-seeming entity crafted with intent. A colossal, perfectly smooth archway, devoid of crude mortar lines, glowed with a faint, inner luminescence, a testament to ancient Aeolid artistry, a signature unmistakable to those who understood the deep magic woven into their very foundations. This was not a natural cave or a common Nordic barrow. This was the entrance to an underground city, or perhaps a sanctuary, carved with precision and animated by a lingering enchantment that held back the earth itself. The air grew stiller, cleaner, and carried the distant, almost imperceptible hum of arcane energy, a silent thrum that vibrated deep within the chest, a memory of power. Stepping through the threshold, the world outside seemed to recede, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. The passage opened into a grand antechamber, its walls soaring upwards, seamlessly carved from the same radiant stone. Here, the air was cool, dry, and carried a faint, metallic tang, like distant lightning captured in amber. The floor, once polished to a mirror sheen, was now dusted with millennia of fine sediment. Yet the underlying geometric patterns of the Aeolid builders still gleamed faintly beneath, guiding the eye further inward, high above immense, faceted Welkin stones, though many were now shattered or dim, still pulsed with a slow, ethereal blue light, casting long, wavering shadows across the vast space. These were not mere lamps. They were repositories of raw magica, harvested and shaped by a civilization that understood the very fabric of existence. The further one ventured into these echoing halls, the more profound the sense of loss became. Beyond the antechamber lay a network of narrower corridors and smaller chambers, many choked with rubble, but each bearing the indelible mark of Aeolid sophistication. One such chamber, remarkably preserved, housed a central pedestal upon which sat a single, perfectly spherical Varla stone, its light long since faded, but its surface still humming with a faint, residual energy that caused the fine dust around it to shimmer. Around this stone, carved into the floor, were intricate schematics, suggesting a device of immense power, perhaps a weapon, a shield generator, or a communication array designed to bridge impossible distances. The very layout of these lower levels seemed to mirror a strategic mind. Corridors leading to defensive choke points, collapsed tunnels that might have once been escape routes or supply lines, and vast, open spaces that could have been assembly points for legions of mage soldiers. It became clear that the Aeolids had not merely endured the Great War. They had actively shaped it, bringing their unparalleled mastery of magica to bear against an enemy whose identity remained shrouded in the mists of time. Their ruins were not just monuments to their civilization, but silent testaments to their desperate, magnificent struggle. Their contributions to the war's destructive legacy, now merely a faint, ethereal hum in the deep earth, a somber echo of a power that once held sway over the very elements, shaping Tamriel itself with every magical blow. The vast antechamber, though seemingly silent, held a deep resonance, a memory woven into its very stones. The faint, ethereal blue glow of the distant Welkin stones seemed to pull the eye deeper into the ruin, revealing not only the sheer scale of Aeolid ambition, but also the meticulous precision of their craft. Smooth, radiant walls ascended towards a ceiling lost in shadow, giving way to narrower, arcing passages that beckoned like forgotten pathways. Here, the air, though still cool and dry, began to carry a subtle, earthy scent, a quiet testament to the millennia that had passed since this place last knew living occupants. Dust motes danced in the infrequent beams of light, like tiny, suspended stars, lending a dreamlike quality to the immense space. Beneath the polished, sediment-dusted floor, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor vibrated, a deep, rhythmic thrum that spoke of ancient, still-functioning mechanisms hidden far below. Perhaps the very foundations that kept the earth from reclaiming this underground marvel. Following the unseen guide of faint patterns on the floor, the passage opened into a grand gallery, its walls adorned with niches that once held gleaming Aeolid statues or intricate artifacts, now empty and silent. It was here that the first clear signs of struggle began to manifest. High on one wall, a massive scorch mark, almost impossibly smooth, marred the otherwise pristine stone, a silent testament to a magical conflagration of immense power. Near it, a section of the ornate ceiling had partially collapsed, not from time's slow erosion, but from a sudden, devastating impact, leaving jagged edges and scattered debris of radiant stone. The air here was cooler still, carrying a faint mineral tang, as if the earth itself was breathing a slow, cold sigh. The profound quiet became almost a pressure, amplifying the visual evidence of a past battle, suggesting a conflict far grander than mere skirmishes, a memory held by the very stones, waiting to be rediscovered. Beyond the damaged gallery, the passage widened into a vast, circular chamber, its center dominated by a colossal, intricately carved Aeolid construct. This was no ordinary artifact. It was a complex, multi-tiered device, its original purpose now obscured by time and immense damage. Jagged fissures spiderwebbed across its polished surface, and entire sections had been blasted away, leaving exposed conduits and shattered crystal fragments that once glowed with captured light. Around its base, scattered across the dust-laden floor, lay the remnants of what appeared to be Aeolid automatons, once formidable guardians, now nothing more than inert piles of metallic components and arcane circuits. The silent, still forms of these shattered sentinels, arranged as if frozen mid-battle, painted a vivid, though silent, picture of a desperate defense. The profound silence of the chamber felt heavy, almost reverent, as if the very air remembered the furious energies unleashed here, the cries of war echoing through the stone before being swallowed by centuries of quiet. Delving deeper into the gallery, the air grew heavy, almost thick, with a palpable sense of residual power. The massive scorch mark, initially perceived as merely an ancient scar, revealed a crystalline sheen upon closer inspection. Tiny, almost imperceptible fragments of raw, solidified magic, jagged and iridescent, clung to the edges of the blackened stone, like frozen tears from a cosmic conflagration. It was not merely fire that had rent this wall, but a force of pure, uncontrolled energy, arcane in its nature, leaving a permanent imprint on the very fabric of the Aeolid architecture. The precise chisel marks of the ancient stonemasons, visible beneath the ethereal residue, spoke of the immense force required to mar such meticulously crafted surfaces. A faint, high-pitched hum, too subtle to be truly heard, but felt as a delicate vibration in the chest, resonated from the largest concentration of these crystallized fragments, a quiet echo of the devastating spell that had struck here countless ages ago. Moving past the immediate point of impact, the true extent of the devastation began to unfurl. The grand gallery, once a testament to Aeolid artistry, now bore the widespread scars of a prolonged and brutal conflict. Not far from the Great Scorch, an entire section of the wall had been gouged away, not cleanly broken, but torn as if by colossal claws, revealing crude, dark tunnels beyond breaches forced through the pristine Aeolid construction, not by the passage of time, but by some immense, persistent pressure from an invading force. Twisted metal, corroded and unrecognizable, lay partially buried beneath fallen masonry, hinting at ancient siege engines or defensive constructs now reduced to skeletal remains. Further along, collapsed archways formed defensive choke points, deliberately brought down to impede an advance, suggesting a desperate, last-stand defense by the Aeolid inhabitants. The faint thrumming from beneath the floor grew slightly more pronounced here, a deeper resonance, as if struggling against the weight of the destruction above. The path twisted around a pile of fractured masonry, revealing a deeper passage beyond the deliberately collapsed archways. Here, the thrumming grew more insistent, a low, rhythmic pulse that seemed to emanate from the very stone underfoot. The air, though still, carried a faint, metallic tang, a scent of ancient rust mingling with the deeper aroma of damp earth. Partially exposed from beneath a landslide of debris, a massive, rusted gear lay half buried, its teeth blunted and warped, suggesting a colossal mechanism designed for defense or destruction. Its surface bore faint, iridescent scorch marks, akin to the magical residue seen earlier, implying a dual assault of force and spell. This wasn't merely a wall brought down by age. It was a contested point, a desperate struggle frozen in time, where advanced siegecraft met equally advanced arcane countermeasures. The scale of the components hinted at engineering far beyond what was commonly known for the Aeolids, raising questions about the invaders, or perhaps a previously unknown facet of Aeolid ingenuity under extreme duress. Following the ever-strengthening thrum, the passage opened into a smaller, circular chamber, clearly once a sanctum of some kind. now scarred and broken. A deep fissure marred one wall, extending down into unseen depths, and it was from this rift that the rhythmic vibration pulsed with undeniable clarity. Embedded within the fractured stone near the fissure's edge, a large, crystalline shard glowed with an internal, pulsing blue light, its surface smooth despite the surrounding chaos. This was the source, not a mechanical hum, but a resonance of pure, concentrated magical energy, a residual heart from a forgotten device. Its faint luminescence cast wavering shadows across fragmented Aelid carvings, depicting scenes of conflict that felt both familiar and alien, figures wreathed in light battling monstrous, shadowy forms, their forms indistinct, blurred by the ravages of time and conflict. The air here felt charged, heavy with the weight of ages, yet serene, as if the chamber had settled into a long, deep slumber, cradling its humming secret. Approaching the radiant shard, the subtle vibrations became a gentle caress against the skin, calming rather than disruptive. Its surface, though appearing solid, seemed to shimmer with an internal dance of captured light, revealing delicate, almost imperceptible etchings within its depths, not runes, but complex, swirling patterns that suggested a deep connection to the Earth's own energies surrounding the crystal. The fractured stone glowed faintly in sympathetic response, as if the ruin itself had absorbed and now slowly bled the ambient magic. This energy, once unleashed with devastating force, now lay dormant, a mere whisper of its former power, yet potent enough to survive countless millennia. It spoke of a war not just of armies, but of magical cataclysms, where the very landscape was a weapon and a casualty. This single shard, a remnant of an unknown device, hinted at a forgotten epoch where magical warfare was waged on an inconceivable scale, forever altering the fabric of Tamriel, leaving behind not just ruins, but echoes embedded in the world's very essence. The crystalline shard's pulsing blue light deepened, casting the ancient Aelid carvings into sharper relief. What had at first seemed a blurred, indistinct struggle now began to reveal faint, heartbreaking details. Figures once wreathed in protective light now appeared gaunt, their faces etched with a desperate resolve, battling against the shadowy, amorphous entities. These were not mere monsters of myth, but foes that seemed to twist the very air around them, their forms shifting as if born from a corrupted arcane force. The carvings, though fragmented, stretched across the chamber's circumference, an epic frieze of a civilization under siege. Each etched line spoke of an immense, prolonged conflict, a burden carried by generations. As the crystalline hum gently resonated, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred within the carved narrative. beyond the Aeolid figures. Other, smaller representations emerged from the shadows, faint, stylized figures with hardened features, distinct from the elegant forms of the Aeolids, some carrying weapons of unfamiliar design, others bearing symbols that were vaguely reminiscent of early Nordic, or perhaps even primordial Dwemer script. They appeared not as allies, but as co-combatants, locked in the same harrowing struggle against the shadowy tide, suggesting a coalition of ancient races. The light that wreathed the primary figures, too, now seemed more ambiguous, less a divine blessing and more a raw, barely contained arcane power, leaving streaks of iridescent residue on the carved battlefields. This wasn't merely a conflict of good versus evil, but a sprawling, complex war that drew upon the disparate strengths and desperate measures of many peoples. The chamber, once a sanctum, now felt like a silent, echoing archive of a Tamrielic catastrophe, its walls saturated with the echoes of shared fear and devastating magic. The colossal mechanism hinted at earlier, the rusted gear half buried, found an unexpected echo in the carvings as well. Not in direct depiction, but in the sheer scale of the conflict's aftermath. Entire sections of the carved battlefield showed structures utterly annihilated, reduced to rubble by forces that transcended common siege engines, implying a level of destructive power that resonated with the scorch marks on that immense gear. The magical energies depicted in the carvings, particularly those wielded by the light-wreathed figures, seemed to ebb and flow with destructive intensity, mirroring the dual assault of force and spell. It was as if the ancient artisans, through their work, were trying to convey not just the participants, but the sheer, world-shattering force of the war. The crystalline shard, the very heart of this ancient resonance, pulsed with a rhythm that felt less like a passive remnant and more like a suppressed memory, a concentrated pocket of residual energy waiting to impart the full scope of its terrible knowledge. A faint, earthy scent, like damp soil over ancient stone, now mingled with the charged air, suggesting unseen passages opening deeper into the earth. The air itself, thick with ages, now seemed to shimmer with residual energies, a faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrating against the ancient stones. It wasn't the hum of an active spell, but the lingering ghost of colossal power unleashed, clinging to every carved surface and seeping into the very bedrock. Dust motes, caught in stray beams of light, filtering through unseen apertures, danced with a subtle luminescence, as if each particle held a fragment of that forgotten, iridescent magic. This was not a story of conquest, but of survival against an encroaching darkness, a tale etched not just into reliefs, but into the very fabric of the world itself, awaiting discovery. The true depth of the Great War, it seemed, was measured not only in fallen empires, but in the enduring resonance of its desperate, world-altering magic. As the gaze drifted from the intricate carvings, it began to discern a pattern in the chamber's very decay. Deep fissures snaked across the floor and up the colossal pillars, not the cracks of age, but the violent rends of immense force. Some bore scorch marks, others seemed glazed, vitrified by heat that must have dwarfed any mundane conflagration. It spoke of weapons and sorceries unleashed on a scale rarely contemplated in Tamriel's documented history, where the land itself became a casualty, groaning under the weight of unthinkable energies. This wasn't merely a struggle of armies, but a cataclysmic reshaping of landscapes, leaving behind scars that time had only partially healed. Beyond the immediate chamber, through a partially collapsed archway, lay a corridor that told a different, yet related story. Here, the elegant Aeolid stonework was interspersed with rougher, darker stone fragments, carefully integrated, almost as if later, desperate repairs or reinforcements were undertaken by hands less skilled in the gleaming aesthetics of the Heartland elves. Upon closer inspection, some of these coarser blocks bore faint, hammered symbols, distinct from Aeolid script, hinting at the primordial Dwemer or early Nordic forms glimpsed in the previous chamber's carvings. These were not random stones, but a mosaic of defensive efforts, suggesting a united front, a desperate alliance forged in the crucible of a shared existential threat. Their combined efforts barely holding back the tide. The faint, luminous dust continued its silent ballet, tracing the path deeper into the forgotten depths. Here, the very air shifted, becoming cooler, tinged with the mineral scent of ancient stone and a subtle, almost sweet, magical resonance. As the passage widened, a vast, columned hall emerged from the gloom, its architecture unmistakably Aeolid. Unlike the rough-hewn strength of Nordic barrows or the metallic precision of Dwemer constructs, this space breathed with an elegant, sorrowful grace. Smooth, pale stones stretched upwards, meeting a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. But every surface bore a network of hairline fractures, like a delicate ceramic bowl, dropped and reassembled. The light, which had previously filtered in through unseen apertures, now emanated from softly glowing crystals embedded high in the walls, casting long, shifting shadows that danced with the dust motes, illuminating the chamber's pervasive, quiet grief. A closer approach to one of the colossal pillars revealed more than just general decay. Intricate, ethereal glyphs, once vibrant with light, now flickered with a hesitant, almost exhausted luminescence, like dying embers. These weren't protective wards or celebratory inscriptions. They were diagrams of immense magical conduits designed to channel power on a scale that dwarfed modern understanding. One particular conduit, a spiraling column of seemingly solidified magic that ran through the pillar's core, showed deep, jagged gashes, as if a great claw had ripped through its protective shell. From these wounds, faint, wispy tendrils of energy escaped, evaporating into the air, a constant, silent bleed of ancient power. It spoke of a desperate, final surge, a magical network pushed beyond its capacity, leaving behind only the ghost of its former might. Tracing the trajectory of the escaping energy, the gaze drifted upwards, past the flickering glyphs, to the far end of the immense hall. There, the elegant Aeolid aesthetic gave way to something more utilitarian, more grim. A colossal, arched gateway, unlike any seen in lesser ruins, loomed, its surface not merely carved, but layered with plates of unknown, shimmering metal that seemed to absorb, rather than reflect, the soft crystal light. Around this gateway, the fractures were not delicate. They were brutal, deep gouges that threatened to cleave the entire structure. Runes of defense, far more aggressive and warning-laden than those found elsewhere, pulsed with a dim, reddish glow, suggesting a final, desperate stand. This was not a sanctuary, but a fortress, its very entrance a testament to an enemy so fearsome that even the masters of light magic had turned to such stark, overwhelming measures, sacrificing beauty for sheer, brute magical force in their final, world-shaking conflict. The ragged wounds in the conduit were not merely signs of decay, but rather a chilling testament to its last, desperate moments of function. It pulsed with a residual warmth, like a muscle that had finally given out after a monumental strain. These were not just channels for passive light or ambient magic. They were arteries of immense power, designed to fuel Aeolid war machines, or to erect shimmering defensive shields that could turn aside the might of legions. The air, thin and cool, seemed to carry faint echoes of the energy that once roared through these veins of solidified magic. A hum almost too low to perceive, a ghostly vibration in the very stone beneath one's feet. It spoke of a cataclysm, a moment when the Aeolid mastery of Magica was pushed to its absolute limits, straining against an unseen, overwhelming force, leaving behind not only shattered stone, but also a profound silence. The scale of the damage suggested a conflict of such intensity that even the most advanced magical engineering of the era buckled and broke under the pressure, leaving these conduits as silent monuments to a desperate last stand. Moving deeper into the hall, the The pervasive network of hairline fractures on the pale stone surfaces took on a new, more somber meaning. They were not merely cracks born of time's slow erosion, but rather subtle scars, faint stress lines radiating from points where immense force must have struck, or where urgent, desperate repairs had been attempted and failed. The elegant carvings that adorned the lower sections of the colossal pillars, once fluid and graceful, were here, and there chipped or scorched, as if by sprays of raw, uncontrolled magic. One could almost discern the hasty, almost frantic efforts of the Aeolid architects and mages to reinforce their structures, to mend the breaks, or to redirect the failing energies in the face of an encroaching disaster. Patches of darker, rougher stone indicated areas where original materials had been compromised and replaced with less refined, more hastily prepared blocks. A stark contrast to the usual flawless workmanship of the Heartland's high elves. These subtle imperfections whispered of a swift, brutal conflict that allowed no time for their customary, meticulous artistry. Further along, nestled within a recess of the wall where a less prominent conduit once ran, lay a curious anomaly, almost entirely swallowed by centuries of dust and fine mineral grit. A single non-Aeolid artifact rested, a rusted, half-buried shield boss, not of elven make, but seemingly of human origin. Its rough, unadorned iron and practical, almost brutal design contrasted sharply with the graceful Aeolid aesthetic surrounding it. The faint, barely discernible symbol etched into its corroded surface was foreign, evoking images of ancient Nedic clans, or perhaps even nascent Nordic tribes, suggesting an enemy from lands far beyond the Aeolid dominion, or an unexpected ally. It was a silent, irrefutable piece of evidence, hinting at a conflict of staggering proportions, drawing in disparate peoples and cultures across Tamriel. This wasn't merely an internal Aeolid struggle. This was a war that bled across borders, leaving behind a universal scar that time had painstakingly, yet incompletely, tried to erase. A forgotten echo of a true great war that reshaped the very fabric of the continent. The pervasive network of hairline fractures and the crude patches of stone offered silent testimony. Yet, a closer inspection of some of the grander pillars revealed something more profound, not merely surface damage, but deep, almost internal scorching. These weren't just marks where fire or energy had licked the stone. They were areas where the very heart of the magically infused rock seemed to have been violently overworked, its inherent power burned out, leaving behind a subtly discolored, almost crystalline scar that pulsed with an almost imperceptible faintness, like a dying ember from an ancient, raging forge. And within these hollowed out spaces, where the echoes of power had once roared, a subtle, lingering aura could be felt. It was not a chill nor a warmth, but a quiet hum that seemed to resonate deep within one's own bones. A ghostly vibration that spoke not of present energy, but of a vast, expended force. This was the residual ghost of Aelid Magica, pushed beyond its limits. Its very essence burned into the fabric of the ruins, a silent testament to the colossal energies unleashed in a desperate final stand. Moving past these resonant pillars, a sprawling circular platform came into view, unmistakably a command or channeling nexus. Its intricate mosaic floor, once a vibrant tapestry of arcane symbols, was now fragmented, scattered with shards of what might have been massive, focusing crystals. Dark, radiating scorch marks erupted from its very center, suggesting not just an overload, but perhaps a catastrophic release or redirection of immense power. It hinted at a moment where the Aelid mages, facing ultimate defeat, might have attempted a forbidden or cataclysmic spell, leaving this nexus as a monument to their desperate and possibly self-destructive resolve. Venturing deeper, the subtle hum grew marginally stronger, guiding one's focus to particular nodes within the collapsing architecture. Here, embedded within a grand support column, was not just scarred stone, but the shattered remnants of what appeared to be an Aelid focus crystal, or perhaps a conduit. Its crystalline structure, once pristine and alive with arcane energy, was now fractured into countless intricate segments, its edges dulled, and its core a deep, lifeless gray. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, some still faintly glowing with the ghost of residual energy, like cooled magma. It seemed to have been violently overloaded, its purpose overwhelmed, its inherent power pushed to a breaking point that left it not merely damaged, but fundamentally altered, a testament to the immense, raw power that coursed through these ancient halls in their final moments. The air around it felt strangely still, as if holding its breath, waiting for the echo of that release to fully fade. The pattern of these energy scars and shattered conduits was far from random. They clustered in specific areas, forming an undeniable, if broken, network. One could trace the path of desperate energy surges, flowing from what must have been central power sources towards outward-facing walls, or towards the entrances of deeper vaults. These were not mere decorative elements, but the remains of sophisticated defensive arrays, magical wardstones, and energy barriers designed to repel an encroaching enemy. Imagine the desperation of the Aelid mages, pouring every ounce of their remaining magicka into these systems, the very stones groaning under the strain. The evidence suggested a final, desperate stand, where the defenses were not merely breached, but overwhelmed by a force so profound and relentless that it physically broke the magical infrastructure itself, leaving behind these silent, power-drained guardians. This desperate struggle wasn't confined to a single chamber or a solitary city. The sheer scale implied by these pervasive scars hints at a conflict that rippled across vast stretches of the heartlands, perhaps even beyond. One could envision these broken magical defenses as nodes in a much grander, continent-spanning network, each falling silent in turn as the ancient war raged. The quiet stillness of these ruins now, broken only by the drip of unseen water and the rustle of overgrown vines, stands in stark contrast to the imagined symphony of arcane warfare. The crackle of overcharged spells, the thunder of collapsing stone, the desperate incantations echoing through these very halls. These Aelid cities, once vibrant centers of arcane power, now serve as colossal, silent monuments to a war that reshaped their very being. A conflict so devastating that its full scope is still largely unwritten in the commonly known annals of Tamrielic history. The energy scars radiating from the shattered crystal were not confined to its immediate vicinity. They spread outwards, spiderwebbing across the grand column itself, etched deep into the ancient stone. These were not mere surface cracks, but rather vitrified pathways where the raw energy had burned its way through the very fabric of the architecture. One could imagine a terrible internal pressure, a magical overload that sought release, not unlike a lightning bolt tearing through solid rock. Nearby, smaller subsidiary conduits, once humming with controlled power, now lay fused and warped, their intricate silver tracery blistered and blackened. The air, still and heavy, seemed to hold the faint, acrid scent of ozone and burnt earth, an olfactory ghost of the cataclysmic forces unleashed here untold ages ago. Even the dust settled differently in these scarred channels, as if avoiding the memory of that searing heat. Moving deeper into the chamber, the signs of this ancient conflict broadened considerably. The once smooth walls of pale Aelid marble were not only etched with residual magical burns, but also marred by deep gouges and impact craters, as if colossal blunt instruments had struck them with immense force. Here, the subtle interplay of light revealed patches where the stone had melted and reformed, a silent testament to a heat beyond natural flame, a fusion of devastating physical and arcane assaults, fragments of what might have been siege constructs, or perhaps parts of the attacking forces' own magical apparatus, lay scattered and petrified in fused heaps, resembling slagged metal frozen mid-explosion. These remnants suggested not just a magical breach, but a full-scale, physical invasion, where every inch of ground was contested, and ancient wards crumbled under a relentless, multifaceted assault that left its indelible mark on the very bedrock of the ruin. Further still, along a crumbling walkway overlooking a collapsed lower level, the full, crushing weight of this forgotten history began to settle. Below, through the swirling dust motes caught in shafts of ambient light, one could discern the outlines of truly immense structures that had simply been pulverized, not merely damaged. Entire sections of what must have been monumental defensive walls had been reduced to formless rubble, buried under sediment that had slowly accumulated over millennia. It was a landscape of utterly annihilated architecture, a testament to a conflict so devastating that it didn't just conquer a city, but erased significant portions of its very existence from the surface world. This wasn't a skirmish, it was an apocalyptic event, an ancient great war, whose echoes shaped the land itself, leaving behind these silent, shattered monuments to a civilization's final, desperate struggle against an incomprehensible power. Moving past the slagged remnants, one's gaze might fall upon deeper, embedded evidence of the ferocious conflict. Here, within a recess carved from the main chamber, a formidable barricade of aelid masonry, clearly a hasty addition to the original design, lay partially demolished. Embedded within its fractured stones were not just burns, but metallic shards, fragments of ancient siege bolts, their arcane enchantments long faded, now mere twisted iron and bronze. They pierced the rock like petrified thorns, testaments to the sheer force with which they were launched. Some still retained faint, crystalline patterns, suggesting a magical payload intended to shatter not just stone, but also protective wards and spiritual defenses. The sheer density of these impacts in a localized area spoke of a desperate, concentrated barrage, a point of relentless assault that the defenders had tried to shore up, only for it to fail under the sustained onslaught. This was not a quick skirmish, but a brutal, prolonged siege, where ancient magic clashed with raw, physical might, leaving layers of destruction for the ages to ponder. Beyond the remnants of that desperate barricade, the chamber opened into a wider hall, but the devastation only intensified. Here, the floor was not merely scarred, but utterly pulverized in sections, forming deep, concave depressions that could only have been formed by immense, sustained concussive force. These craters were not random. They formed a rough, linear pattern, suggesting repeated bombardments aimed at a specific defensive line or strategic choke point. Patches of the once lustrous aelid floor had vitrified into smooth, obsidian-like glass, reflecting the dim, ambient light cold, unforgiving sheen. This transformation wasn't due to impact alone, but the searing, focused heat of potent magical attacks, perhaps elemental blasts or concentrated arcane fire, turning solid rock into molten streams that then cooled into these dark, glassy pools. The very air here seemed thinner, almost hollow, as if the sheer energy expended had leached something vital from the atmosphere itself, leaving behind an empty echo. Amidst this widespread ruin, a curious detail emerged near one of the larger vitrified depressions. A section of the chamber wall, though scarred, revealed a faintly glowing, almost shimmering barrier, barely visible now, but once a powerful defensive ward. Its integrity had been compromised, collapsing inwards in a jagged, spiraling fracture. Yet, it had not entirely dissolved. Within the ephemeral, residual energies of this failing shield, ghostly outlines sometimes coalesced, faint, ethereal figures, standing sentinel or perhaps caught in a final, defiant gesture. These were not mere illusions, but memory echoes, spectral imprints of the ancient defenders, their forms indistinct and translucent, flickering like dying embers. They suggested a frantic, magical defense, not just of stone and steel, but of spirit and will. A desperate stand made as the protective enchantments failed around them. The silence of the hall then became heavier, imbued with the unspoken saga of these spectral guardians, forever bound to their final moments. The air, once merely hollow, deepened into a palpable stillness as we moved deeper into the ruin. Here, the floor was less scarred by impact and more by absorption. Streaks of dull silver and coppery green meandered across the polished stone, not embedded, but somehow staining it from within. These metallic veins pulsed with a faint, internal light, like slow, frozen lightning, hinting at a different kind of magical saturation. It was as if the very essence of powerful, lingering enchantments had seeped into the ground itself, leaving behind an inert, yet undeniably potent, residue. The silence here wasn't empty, but full of forgotten energies, a quiet hum only the deepest parts of the stone could feel. High above, where the vaulted ceiling once soared, now hung delicate, intricate webs of what appeared to be solidified arcane energy. They weren't cobwebs, but shimmering filaments of pale blue and violet, catching the dim ambient light like spun starlight. These crystalline formations cascaded down, sometimes touching the stained floor, creating fragile pillars of frozen power. They spoke of a moment when the very fabric of magic had been overloaded, causing it to manifest physically, slowly dissipating over untold centuries. The air, thick with this ethereal dust, carried a faint, almost imperceptible scent, like ozone mixed with ancient minerals, a breath from the distant past. Venturing further, a chamber opened, distinct from the main hall. Its circular walls were lined with alcoves, each holding what might have been a pedestal or a shrine. But every single one was shattered, not blasted outwards, but imploded, as if drawing all light and matter inward before collapsing into itself. The stone here wasn't merely broken, it was warped, its natural grain twisted into impossible, swirling patterns. This indicated a force far beyond conventional siege magic, perhaps a manipulation of space, or a focused nullification field designed to collapse magical structures and protective enchantments. The emptiness here was profound, a vacuum of presence that spoke to a highly specialized, devastating form of magical warfare, targeting the very fabric of defense. The path ahead led us deeper still, past the shimmering filaments of frozen magic that still adorned the outer chambers, into a truly vast and awe-inspiring hall. Here, the immediate devastation of the initial impact zones gave way to something more profound, a deliberate artistry that spoke of purpose and memory. The walls, soaring upward into a distant, unseen vaulted ceiling, were not scarred by chaos, but meticulously etched with intricate, faded glyphs. These were not mere decorations, nor simple warnings, but appeared to be ancient chronicles, a visual library carved directly into the bedrock of the ruin. Their forms were complex, a hybrid of pictograms, and a script so archaic it defied immediate recognition, whispering tales in a language long forgotten by the modern world. The faint, internal light from the metallic veins in the floor below seemed to intensify here, reflecting upwards, casting long, dancing shadows of the glyphs onto the vaulted ceiling above, making the stone almost breathe with a forgotten luminescence. As our vision adjusted to the subtle, ambient glow of the chamber, and our minds began to attune to the patterns within the ancient carvings, certain sequences of glyphs began to stand out with striking clarity, drawing the eye with their stark, powerful imagery. They depicted not just isolated skirmishes or tactical maneuvers, but the terrifying, all-encompassing scale of true warfare. Here, armies clashing under skies rent by potent arcane fire were vividly portrayed, legions arrayed against legions, their forms stylized but unmistakable in their martial intent and sheer numbers. Colossal siege engines, unlike anything documented in modern engineering or military history, were shown tearing down mighty fortifications, their magical energies rippling outwards in destructive waves. Figures of immense, almost divine, magical power dominated sections of the murals, their hands crackling with raw energy, reshaping the battlefield with but a gesture. creating chasms or raising ethereal shields. These weren't the localized conflicts or border disputes of later eras, nor even the grand campaigns familiar from imperial or Aldmeri histories. Among these ancient carvings, amidst the depictions of grand armies and cataclysmic magical duels, one particular sequence captured attention with a chilling, yet profoundly calm clarity. It was not a scene of direct combat, but rather the depiction of cities, grand and impossibly tall, dissolving into dust under focused magical assaults. These weren't crude explosions, but a kind of slow, irreversible decay, orchestrated by forces wielding powers seemingly beyond current understanding, an unraveling of reality itself. These were not mere fortifications being breached, but vibrant centers of civilization, with spires reaching to the heavens and intricate roadways being utterly erased from existence, their very essence unmade. The glyphs suggested a conflict not just of conquest or territorial gain, but of existential annihilation, a complete unmaking of entire cultures and their legacies. It was a war fought not just to dominate, but to utterly cleanse, to wipe clean the slate of history. The monumental scale of conflict etched into the stone went beyond mere battles. Certain sequences hinted at cataclysms, not skirmishes. Glyphs spiraled into abstract representations of elemental chaos, depicting land sundered, mountains toppled, and seas boiling under skies torn by energies too vast for mortal comprehension. It spoke not of victory or defeat, but of an overwhelming, world-altering force. These were not the localized wars of later eras, nor even the grand campaigns familiar from imperial or Aldmeri histories, but something more primal, more devastating, leaving an indelible scar upon the very fabric of Mundus. The silence of the ruin now, broken only by the faint hum of the metallic veins, seemed to resonate with the echoes of that unimaginable destruction. A profound quietude born from ultimate violence. As the full weight of these ancient depictions settled, our gaze naturally drifted from the walls to the immediate surroundings. The very architecture of the chamber, though still standing, bore subtle testament to the forces hinted at by the glyphs. Vast, seamless blocks of stone, forming arches and vaulted ceilings, showed hairline fractures that spiderwebbed across their surfaces, not from natural erosion alone, but seemingly from immense concussive pressure. Deep scorch marks, now faded to charcoal gray, marred sections of the lower walls, hinting at fires or magical blasts that had long since cooled. This wasn't merely a place of ancient record, it was a surviving remnant, itself a scarred monument, having endured what was shown upon its own skin. The air, though still, carried an almost imperceptible scent of ozone and ancient dust, a phantom memory of power. Stepping deeper into the complex, the subtle hints gave way to unmistakable forms. The architecture began to shift, revealing patterns familiar from the heartland's forgotten past. Aeolid designs, the smooth, white gold stone, the intricate filigree, and the crystalline conduits that laced the walls and ceiling were unmistakable. Yet, even these elegant structures, known for their arcane power and beauty, bore the marks of a deeper, more brutal purpose within this forgotten war. Here, the crystals pulsed with a duller, more ancient light, their usual vibrant glow muted by eons of disuse and perhaps profound energetic drain. One could almost feel the phantom currents of magic that once coursed through these halls, perhaps channeling the very energies depicted in the glyphs, bending them to the will of sorcerer kings, whose names have long faded from memory. This was no mere tomb, but a silent testament to a world reshaped. The air, though still, carried an almost imperceptible scent of ozone and ancient dust, a phantom memory of power. Our steps, now consciously softer, barely disturbed the millennia of settled quiet. We moved deeper into the cavernous space, past the obvious scars, towards a central depression in the floor where the natural flow of the chamber seemed to converge. Here, the metallic veins that crisscrossed the walls, previously perceived as mere geological anomalies, revealed their true, deliberate nature. They coalesced, not in a chaotic tangle, but in an intricate lattice of silvered lines, carefully embedded directly into the dark, polished stone of the floor. This was no geological vein. It was a vast, complex runic array, its patterns too precise, too symmetrical to be accidental. Beyond the colossal warding sigil, a new passage opened, less a natural cave-in, and more a deliberate, albeit partially collapsed, thoroughfare that wound its way into the deeper recesses of the ancient complex. The change in architecture was subtle at first, then became undeniably pronounced, marking a distinct shift in the very soul of the ruin. The raw, utilitarian stonework and crude, battle-scarred surfaces gave way to elegant, vaulted corridors crafted from pearlescent white marble, now dulled and stained by time, but still retaining an inherent luminosity that seemed to absorb and diffuse the faint light. The intricate carvings that adorned every archway and pillar were unmistakably Aeolid, depicting flowing organic forms intertwined with geometric precision, a stark and beautiful contrast to the abstract chaos of the earlier glyphs. This was unequivocally an Aeolid hall, its grand scale suggesting it was once a place of immense importance, perhaps even a sanctuary for a powerful noble house, or a center of arcane study. Dust motes danced lazily in the sparse, ethereal shafts of twilight filtering down from fissures far above, illuminating delicate frescoes on the high ceilings, faded, yet still discernible, telling a different kind of story than the raw violence depicted earlier. As we traversed these hallowed, whispering halls, the air grew cooler, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and ancient magic, far removed from the ozone of the initial chamber. The Aeolid architecture became even more elaborate, leading us into what must have been a central reliquary or a chamber of profound ritual. Here, the floor dipped slightly, creating a shallow basin around a central plinth. Upon this plinth rested a solitary, crystalline object, partially obscured by a delicate veil of calcified dust. It was a welkined stone, not fully spent, but deeply cracked, its internal luminescence guttering with a slow, irregular pulse, unlike the vibrant, energetic glow one might expect. This stone emitted a mournful, almost sorrowful blue light, casting long, wavering shadows across the carved faces on the walls. The frescoes themselves were masterpieces of subtle storytelling, rendered in pigments that had long since faded to gentle pastels. Yet their narratives remained potent. They depicted not battles or heroes, but scenes of tranquil Aeolid life, sun-drenched gardens where luminous flora bloomed under crystal arches, scholarly conclaves gathered around glowing orbs of magica, and graceful figures engaged in quiet contemplation, their forms elongated and serene. These were visions of an era of profound peace, a stark testament to a civilization once so secure in its brilliance that it chronicled only beauty and harmony. The air, thin and still, seemed to hold the echoes of forgotten melodies, carrying a faint, sweet scent of petrichor and ancient dust. It was an idol, meticulously preserved on these high walls, untouched by the raw, violent scrawls found deeper within the ruin. This quiet art spoke of a world unburdened by conflict, before any widespread cataclysm could shatter its delicate equilibrium. Yet, as the gaze drifted lower, away from the serene frescoes and towards the practicalities of the hall, a different narrative began to emerge. Near the base of several grand pillars, where the elegant, flowing carvings once reached the floor, subtle imperfections marred the smooth marble. Patches of lighter, almost starker stone suggested hasty repairs, not with the typical Aeolid precision, but with a more functional, almost desperate intent. Further along, a section of the wall, initially appearing as an unusual shadow, revealed itself to be a crude, yet robust, fortification built directly into the original structure. It was a barricade, partially collapsed and covered in layers of dust, but unmistakably a defensive addition. The beautiful Aeolid designs were not destroyed, but rather abruptly truncated or simply built over, evidence of a sudden, urgent need to protect what was once thought impregnable. The calm of the frescoes felt like a distant memory against the undeniable marks of a struggle. Beyond this makeshift defense, the corridor widened into a broader space, still unmistakably Aeolid, but with a perplexing addition. Embedded directly into the pearlescent floor, not as an ornamental design, but as a deliberate, functional inlay, were long, thin strips of a dark, obsidian-like material. They ran parallel, then converged, forming geometric patterns that seemed to trace the path of something immense that had once moved through this very hall. This material, unlike any native stone or traditional Aeolid artistry, pulsed with a faint, barely perceptible residual energy, a cool, almost magnetic hum against the otherwise still air. It was a signature, alien to the exquisite grace of the Aeolids, suggesting external technology, or perhaps a desperate measure taken by them. The dark lines intersected with the original runic patterns of the floor, not obscuring them, but adding another, stark layer of purpose, speaking of heavy loads, immense forces, or perhaps the passage of colossal war machines.